Today, as you can see below, we're here to talk about sustaining manufacturing skills by sharing wisdom. Lots of that is about intergenerational communications and the skills challenges that we're facing today in manufacturing. As you'll probably notice, I am not Shazana. Unfortunately, she's been called away for family emergency. So I'll introduce myself and then I'll let the panel introduce themselves to you. My name's Rose. I've worked at Make UK for just over a year and a half now. I work in the employment and skills team in the policy section, and I lead on our inclusion strategy. In my spare time, I do a lot of work with British Rowing. I work predominantly with enhancing communication and coaching for neurodivergent individuals. So obviously talking to young people and talking to people who are new to things, learning new skills is something that I'm very passionate about. So it's actually very exciting that I get to chair today. So really looking forward to going through this session. So last year, as many of you will know, manufacturers and industry experts came together to talk about how we attract new talent into the sector. We're now thinking about how the fact that we've got most of our workforce already for the next 10 years already in the workforce, and the fact that we've got lots of young people, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, starting to make decisions on careers if they're not already in early careers. We want to bring together our selection of young people, some of the people on our panel will introduce themselves as early year engineers, but we've also got apprentices from Make UK who I'll bring up a little bit later and who'll be popping around your tables to give their feedback in this session, to just talk about their experience of the sector and how we can improve intergenerational communication. So I reckon we'll probably do about half an hour of talking about skills and solutions in our tables. Luckily, there seem to be quite a lot of you, so I don't need to pull anyone in. And without further ado, I will ask our panellists to just introduce themselves. Fab. Take it away, Simon.
Oh, yes. Hi. Good morning, everybody. My name's Simon Farmfield. I'm the event director for a number of trade shows in the UK, namely Advanced Engineering and Southern Manufacturing and Electronics. I'm also pleased to have gone through judging the Apprenticeships Awards this year for Make UK, which totally opened my eyes and, from my perspective, really did give me a sense of where apprenticeships are and how exciting they are. So that's myself. So I'm looking forward to being part of this.
Hi everyone, I'm Jamie Cater. I lead on employment and skills policy for Make UK. So everything to do with manufacturing workforces and workplaces. I lead our engagement with government, politicians, policymakers to try to shape the policy and regulatory landscape to encourage industry and help industry recruit, retain and train for the skills it needs.
Hi everyone, I'm Alexia Williams, so I'm through life technical lead at Rolls-Royce. I started my career as an aerospace degree apprentice, moved on to become a master's degree apprentice, now in a technical lead role 6 years since starting at Rolls-Royce. I'm also non-executive director at EAL, one of the UK's leading awarding organisations for engineering qualifications, as well as being on the board of trustees of Engineerity.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'm going to go straight ahead and ask Jamie to just give us a short overview of the skills and communication challenges in the sector, and then I'll bring on our apprentices and we'll break out into groups. Cool.
Great, thanks Rose, and thanks everyone for choosing this session. You would expect me as the lead on these issues for Make UK to tell you how significant a priority this is for us and our members, and I think the issues that we're going to get into today really kind of go to the heart of where we're seeing some of the real challenges for our members, and where we as industry working together with government and others can begin to sort of figure out how we improve that sort of transfer of knowledge, skills, expertise through businesses, and how we enable employers to kind of acquire and develop and refine the right skills. From our research, we know that 37% of manufacturers identify employability skills or softer skills as the biggest challenge in taking on new staff, and in particular in recruiting apprentices. I think employability skills, I think it can often feel like a bit of a buzzword, a bit of a kind of fluffy term. You will have heard Stephen this morning refer to the work that our Industrial Strategy Skills Commission is doing. Rose and I are helping to lead that work, and as Stephen says, we'll be reporting in April. Throughout that process, we've been lucky enough to go and visit some brilliant manufacturers in our membership, some brilliant training providers as well. And one of the sites that we visited was David Nieper in Alfreton in Derbyshire. I'm not sure if Christopher's in the room actually. I have seen him in the building this morning, but it's a brilliant business in textile manufacturing. And they sponsor a local school. And we were lucky enough to be able to go into that school and speak to some of the pupils and talk to them about how employability skills are embedded across all of the subjects they do, and it's kind of been embedded into their curriculum. And what was really impressive about that was just the ability of these young people, some of them as young as 11 or 12, their ability to express themselves, articulate themselves in terms of what they'd been learning, but also the kind of how they understood the application of that knowledge of what they've been learning and its future relevance to what they will be doing in the workplace. So, you know, some of the skills that they've acquired around, you know, communication, teamwork, collaboration, how to be able to kind of challenge each other in a sort of positive and appropriate way, how they agree on different kind of team roles in terms of, you know, a project lead, who's supporting on which task, and their ability then to explain what they'd done in their projects, how they'd done it, why they'd done it in a particular way, was just, it was really impressive. You know, and I think some of the 12-year-olds in that room had, you know, in some ways they were able to communicate some of that stuff in a much better way than, if I'm being honest, some of the adults that I've worked with in my sort of professional life. And I think it's because they could understand, you know, when they were talking about things like teamwork and collaboration, they could understand that, you know, these were not just kind of buzzwords they were learning off a worksheet. They were being shown throughout the curriculum, throughout their different subjects, where these things could be applied, and understanding their relevance to the workplace. So we know that those skills are in high demand. 2/3 of manufacturers say that they are focusing first and foremost on developing those skills, and that they're becoming more relevant and in demand over time. And I think what's interesting and what I would like to kind of get into when we move into the discussion, in particular with our apprentices, is the extent to which you as businesses, as employers of young people, of young apprentices, feel that you kind of have the expertise and the ability in your businesses to be able to communicate with those young people as well. So not just the young people's ability coming out of the education system to express themselves and to you know, behave in an appropriate way in the workplace, but we know that 66% of manufacturers feel that their immediate priority in terms of skills gaps is leadership and management. And we hear a lot about a real struggle with manufacturers to recruit kind of good line managers or develop good line managers with the right communication skills to, you know, speak to different generations in an appropriate way, to have sensitive, tricky conversations with their employees. So we kind of want to look at it from both perspectives. How can we make sure that the education system is equipping young people coming through that system with the right communication skills to be able to enter the labour market and enter work? but also how can we make sure people already in work, already in the business who are maybe taking on supervision responsibilities, mentorship responsibilities, line management responsibilities for those apprentices, that they know how to communicate with those people as well, because that's such an important part of kind of the passing on of that institutional knowledge, those technical skills, expertise that with a significantly ageing workforce in the sector, we risk losing unless we facilitate more of that sharing of information. So I'll leave it there, but looking forward to getting into the discussions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jamie. And then maybe I could just ask, because we've got a touch more time than I'd anticipated, perhaps Alexia and Simon, you could just feed in a minute or so on that before I introduce the apprentices and your experiences of communication challenges in the workplace.
Alexia, do you want to?
Yeah, I can take this one. So having been an apprentice myself, obviously I've come into the industry and seen firsthand sort of where the challenges lie. And I think one of the things actually I struggled with in my first placement when I came into the business was the fact that the team I came into had never had an apprentice before. They'd only ever had already skilled individuals come into their team that knew already sort of what to do. So with myself coming in, not a clue how to do naval controls and system architecture, I was completely baffled. And it was almost a learning curve for them as much as it was for me in terms of how do you actually work with someone that's never been in an industry before? How do you show them how to do things, help them develop in a way that actually they learn and benefit from it? And if I'm honest, that first placement wasn't the best, and it didn't make me want to go back there because of the experience I had where the people within the workforce didn't know how to sort of treat and deal with an apprentice. And the line manager, he didn't like the fact that I was out one day a week at uni. So that for him was a massive barrier. But I think where, as a company, as an employer, can sort of train up their workforce and make sure that it's an inviting environment for people to work in, is actually making them aware of what does an apprentice need, what does an intern need, what does a graduate need, and how they're different and how their experience levels are different, and also what will they be doing in a week, what should a typical week look like for someone that's younger. Yes, okay, it might be they're out one day a week at uni, or they're going to be out for so many weeks a year doing additional training courses, and making the team aware, making the people aware that actually that's what it's like for them when they come into the industry as an early career professional, and how to support them through that and make it an inviting and enjoyable experience for them.
Yeah, just to back that up, having spoken to or interviewed lots of apprentices over the last, up to the awards that was just delivered, you hear that quite regularly in terms of there's a communication breakdown. I mean, you're talking more around communication within the organisation, but between the colleges and the actual line managers and the people, there's that kind of, it just breaks down quite a lot, and that's one area they always talk about improving. And the other part, I suppose, on that is sometimes there's the vision, like the view of where they're going in their roles, and that obviously probably affects retention, which I know we talk about. So having that communication, clear line of where they're going and how they can become those line managers and leaders, I think is really important for apprentices. I think that would negate some of the dropout, which is around 50%, isn't it? I think you lose. But then going back to what you were talking about earlier around the actual early years, I've got an 11-year-old boy, and he already knows what he doesn't want to do, which is frustrating, which is to work in this sector. But that's because he's got a perception already, and I think that's where we need to work really hard in terms of the curriculum and stuff. So that would be my other bit that we should be discussing.
Yeah,
and just how we can change that potentially in the schools.
Brilliant. Thank you. Right, I'm going to introduce the apprentices to you from our Tech Hub, and then after that, I'm going to split you off into groups. Everyone will come down and we'll have a chat. Do you want to come up, guys?
Hi, my name's Adam. I'm 18 years old. I work for Arconic, Kids Green, Birmingham. Arconic specialises in aluminium, so they use aluminium slabs and they cater for the Airbus and aerospace industry. I myself work for electrical maintenance, so obviously my job is if a production rings up, as they always do, and say there's a machine broken down, I have to head over with my mentor and obviously try crack what the problem is. Obviously it's not always easy, you don't just walk up and find the problem straight away, but I try my best.
Hello, my name is Morgan. I am 18. I'm currently in my second year as an apprentice working with JLR. I'm also studying at the minute. I'm doing electrical and mechanical engineering. So when I go to plant, my job is like maintenance. So if I get a call, I follow my team leader down and we go and try and fix whatever's wrong.
Hi, I'm Jasmine and I work at Birmingham Stopper. I'm 20 and Birmingham Stopper mainly focus on presswork and fabrication. My apprenticeship is also for electrical and mechanical maintenance, and I focus mainly on the power presses and occasionally the press tools.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. Right, I'm going to split you into groups. I'm conscious that there's a small table here who I will pick on. If you could just move over to that group so that we get everyone involved. The apprentices will run around, give you some of their feedback, and our facilitators will come over now. And we'll start talking about the questions that they've all got handed over to them about your communication challenges and where we go from here. Thank you very much. So going on to the feedback, perhaps Simon, Jamie, Alexi, you could give us a short overview of some of the things that you picked up from today's session, and then we'll hand it over to all of you to ask questions to the panel and to our apprentices. Great.
Great. Okay. Thank you. I was on a table just over there. We were talking around retention. Morgan gave us some great insights into JLR and how things have changed quite drastically, actually, in the last sort of 10 years. But communication is absolutely critical. Just understanding, like, they've just talked about this middleman, ITM, they call it, coming in, and that being that person that sort of is in between the college and the line manager. And that, I know that's difficult for SMEs to deliver, but certainly that really interesting. It just made simple things like knowing when your apprentices are going to be on the shop floor, so therefore, or what kind of training that they've already got, or they've just been doing, so they can smoothly be transitioned each week. And that made a big difference, rather than the apprentices turning up and they're like, well, we don't know what you've done, what you're doing, right, just stand in the corner over there. That type of feeling, which is seriously not what we want as an industry. So that was one thing that really made a big difference for Morgan in terms of retention. But I could be rattling on, but I thought that was a really good example of how good communication can make a big difference.
Yeah, we covered quite a lot of ground, spoke a lot about the kind of wider apprenticeship and skills system and how well or not very well it's set up for both employers and apprentices. I think what was really interesting from my perspective was we started off at the beginning of the conversation talking quite a lot about retention, and firstly just kind of talking about some of the sort of financial imperatives behind that and the ability of some employers to just kind of pay a bit extra to kind of entice apprentices away, and some of the challenges for small employers to actually kind of keep hold of people that they've invested quite a lot of money in and quite a lot of time and effort in, and that being a kind of real challenge. And then we moved on to talking about how there is a challenge and an opportunity for businesses around kind of articulating sort of what their skills needs are, what their business needs are, and how that kind of translates into how an apprentice, a young recruit, a new recruit is sort of managed, how they understand their role in the company, how they understand their kind of pathway to progression, their future career opportunities, which I thought was a really interesting conversation. So lots of food for thought. I think the second thing, just to sort of quickly finish, is we heard lots of really good insight from Jasmine, one of our apprentices, about what her employer was doing really well in terms of kind of taking things at the right speed, being kind of clear about what an apprentice can and can't do at different stages of their development, things that they've learned, the things that they need and want exposure to. And we spoke a little bit about how sometimes the apprenticeship system, the way in which that works, can constrain that a little bit. The way in which the system has changed over the last decade means that, there's been a focus on kind of depth rather than breadth. So we have a very large number of quite narrow, quite rigid apprenticeship standards now, compared with the previous system. And how do we make sure that employers can have the opportunity and the apprentices have the opportunity to gain that exposure to kind of different parts of the business and acquire different skills and experiences. So there's a challenge there around the flexibility of the system to enable an apprentice to say to their employer, I'm really interested in this thing, or I'm really interested in getting a bit of exposure to something else. Can we kind of make that happen within the sort of strictures of actually quite a rigid system?
Yeah, so we went through what we're currently doing well in the business for communication-wise, and one of the things that sort of came up with a lot of the people on my table was around bringing apprentices straight into the world of work. Quite a lot of organisations and how the apprenticeship standard works is normally that the apprentice is at college for the full first year, but actually doing it so that they're at college 2 weeks and then in the business for 2 weeks, it allows them to actually realise what it's like to be in work, and they're able to apply what they're learning sooner. One of the other things that was discussed was around schedule, and actually having more of a fixed schedule for all of the people in work, including the apprentices, gives them sort of a sense of what's required of them. And then one of the people on the table was talking around, they have a stand-up meeting in the morning that's at 7:30, and it's almost people self sort of judge if people aren't there. So instead of it being management saying, why weren't you there at stand-up, they actually feel like they need to be there because other people, their teammates, will see it. And that sort of building in that culture for the apprentice of what it's like to be within business and what it's like to be within work, and having that sort of cultural, collaborative environment for them. And another thing that came up was around giving the apprentices a whole view of the business, so bringing along some young people to board meetings and bringing them along to leadership calls, and actually giving out communications to all employees at all levels so everyone's getting the same message, and apprentices are able to give their view up into leadership, and leadership are able to talk directly down to the apprentices rather than it having to go through multiple layers of management to get there, and them feeling a disconnection from the leadership of the company and the leadership of the organisation, and they don't feel like actually they're a valued employee part of it.
Can I just,
Yeah,
you brought up something there which just reminded me of something that came up, which is a scheme, and I can't remember which organisation it is, but it's actually the apprentices mentoring the leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember where it was, but when it came up in one of the interviews, and I thought that was a fascinating concept, where it was a revert. So they're the ones that were mentoring the CEO, and the board, and telling them what they need to be doing. Just thought I'd bring that up. I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
When it comes back to me, I'll remember.
That's something that we do at Rolls-Royce,
Or maybe
and I
it was
know
Rolls-Royce.
other companies that they do. We actually pair some of the younger apprentices up with leadership, and they almost do half their session is the leader giving mentorship to the apprentice, and then the other half is the apprentice giving it back to the leader. And actually that's fascinating, because I've done it myself, and I've got a mentor outside of Rolls-Royce that I do the same sort of concept with. And it's fascinating that they actually have problems that you don't expect them to be having, that you think, why is a senior leader having issues with getting people to join in with a call, or like helping them do this, and actually being able to get the younger person's perspective of why they might not want to go and listen to you ramble on for half an hour. It's this sort of back and forth is really, really quite beneficial for the organisation.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. I've got a few more minutes for Q&As, or if you had any feedback that you particularly like to give, we've got a roaming mic. If not, I'm quite happy to summarise and close the session. So any burning questions, thoughts and feelings? Oh, nobody's feeling brave today. That's okay. So I think in terms of what I've gained from the session, some excellent examples of best practice. I can only speak from my table, but I've learned so much about what everyone's doing to improve intergenerational communication. And that's particularly something that I've, like, from an angle that I had not considered in as much depth as I perhaps should have in terms of your ageing workforce who hold all of the knowledge, but we haven't quite got to write down everything. So like making sure you're upskilling who's going to come after, which is brilliant, not just your young people. I know that our apprentices are around. They're dotted about on the tables, but they'll also be downstairs. So if you've got any questions you'd like to ask them, I'm sure that they'll be happy to take them in a format downstairs. Is it the exhibition room, I think, where all of the stands are? In terms of the final parts of the session, I'd just like to say thank you to Advanced Engineering for sponsoring it, and for the panel for coming up, and our facilitators on the table, and all of you for popping along to talk to us about your best practice and what you can do to improve intergenerational communication. Up next, I think in the St. James's room, we've got creating a culture of safety, more best practice, but for every stage of the journey. Or you can stay here and discuss how to give your organisation a competitive advantage. And then finally downstairs, we've got making the most of your membership in a couple of minutes. So do feel free to
Could I just
head off. Oh, yeah, no,
so
sorry.
just one thing,
Go ahead.
sorry, just because I'll get told off my marketing team if I don't do this. We have a stand downstairs. We are doing some, you can win some prizes and all that sort of stuff, some good ones, but it's all about your manufacturing hero. We really want to understand, we're talking about vision, who you look up to and stuff, and it doesn't have to be like Stephen Phipson, but it could be someone, and just if you can come by our stand, stand number 17, have a look, just talk to the team about, because we do this thing called Mind the Skills Gap, and we want to understand, what people, who they see as a hero in their industry. So if you could do that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Great.
Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you so much. I think we should probably give our panel and everyone who facilitated a quick round of applause.